Hello, and welcome to another episode of In Conversation with Rashmi. Today, my guest in conversation is Sowmya Rajasekaran. Sowmya is a champion and an outspoken advocate for inclusion and women's empowerment with a key focus on social impact. When COVID hit, Sowmya was laid off and began reaching out to her community to check in. These conversations inspired her to launch BuildUpWomen Series, an online community created to inspire, learn from, share, support, engage, and build up women during and post COVID-19. So thank you so much, Sowmya, for being a part of this conversation. Pleasure having you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is amazing.
So Build Up Women, can you tell me what it is about? And
Sure. It was definitely an untraditional route that I have to say. It wasn't something that I had entertained before, but in 2020, I started a new venture and then COVID hit in March. And like many, I was also laid off as a result of that for financial restraints and things like that. And one of the things that I've always kind of paid attention to is who's being represented when it comes to COVID-19 impact and whose voices aren't heard. And it was very clear to me that the voices of women were not being represented in terms of the disproportionate impact on women during the pandemic. And it still isn't. There's a long way to go. So I actually started connecting with several people within my community and outside my community, and right when I hit to just check in and have those very candid and vulnerable conversations and how we're doing as women in the society in kind of the roles that we are playing, or the multiple roles that we're playing. And those conversations really inspired me to launch Build Up Women, to really ensure that I'll be able to bring core issues to the forefront of conversations, but making sure that there is an inclusive representation across the board, mainly because that was something that I'd never been witness to, and inclusive conversations are still need a lot of work in our communities. So that's something that I was really striving for. I've also never done it before, so first I was thinking, okay, so I really want to do this, but I have no money because I just lost my job, and I'm a parent, so I had my 20-month-old with me and trying to just kind of navigate, well, how am I going to make this happen? So I began reaching out to incredible women who are doing amazing things within their communities across Canada, and really had a very open conversation about the disproportionate impact on women. And had it honestly not been for that support and the support from the community of women kind of showing up to these conversations and partaking in them, it probably wouldn't exist, right? So with Build Up Women, what it is, it's essentially an online community for women to really come together and support each other and pick each other up and inspire one another and learn from each other, and just be a huge support system during and post COVID-19.
absolutely.
And a lot of the focuses that were addressed really came from the communities.
The importance of feedback from the community and what they require and what they need. Also, I'm sure, Sowmya, you would want to know from the community what is it that they want and how they can support you.
Yeah, absolutely. And this has been kind of as part of the impact piece of Build Up Women, is to really learn from the community, learn about their thoughts on the series and the conversations that they've attended, but also understanding what has been missing, right? And what can we kind of focus more on in terms of addressing some of the issues. So currently there is a poll on LinkedIn, so anyone can let us know what their thoughts are, what they would like to see addressed. If it's not in the options, please write it in the comments section so that those don't go unaddressed. But we'd love the kind of the help from the community to really learn more from you. And we want to make sure we're also representing the community as well, and not just choosing for the community. So if you have a second, takes 2 seconds, just go in and just let us know what you'd like to learn more or address.
Where can they reach you, Sowmya, to do the poll or, connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can reach me via LinkedIn. There's a BuildUpWomen Series page, so feel free to search for it. And if you'd like to be a part of that page, just click on like to be a member, and we'll continue to monitor that. We are also on Twitter, so BuildUpWomen, capital S. Feel free to write a message there, and also on Facebook as well. So BuildUpWomen Series, feel free to leave a message there as well.
Like for me, I've never heard growing up the word feminist, right? Like that is something that was born much later, the terminology. So for you, when did you first hear the word feminism or feminist?
To be very honest, it's a term that I didn't hear until I went to university.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were different variations in terms of the right to choose and all those things, but it didn't have a definitive term. It didn't fall under feminism. And I think I'm kind of glad that it happened in the way that it did, because I feel like everyone has their own definition, or a lot of people have their own personal definition of what feminism should be. And my definition may not be the same as what everyone else is.
Yeah.
But I think it should be, in the sense that feminism is about choice. It's not about putting each other down, because it doesn't fall under the values that you have as a woman, right? So I think it's about embracing each other's differences. It's about guiding each other, supporting each other, making sure that that choice is part of those conversations. So I'm glad that it didn't have a definition when I was in school, because had it had a definition, I would have perceived it as this XYZ, and having that pressure to say, okay, but is what I'm doing like a feministic approach? Yeah. This is what it should be,
And that's my concern for my daughter now, because and my son even, right? Like these conversations are out there, and what is it that we want to teach the generation next? Like you have kids too, so you have your daughter, and so does she ever ask you questions about it? And so what do you tell them?
I mean, we had this conversation earlier on. I've always been a rebellious child, in the sense that I don't like stereotypes in terms of what women can and cannot do. And that's something that I'm glad that I embraced about myself, and not reshape or remold it based on what society wanted. And that is the approach that I am taking with my daughter. It's just because you're a girl doesn't mean you have to wear pink, and if you wear pink doesn't mean you can't like tools and dinosaurs and all these other things that are deemed masculine. So I think that part I'm really, really grateful, in the sense that I approached it and I like head on right from the beginning, to ensure that she doesn't associate and she doesn't have a definition of what it is to be a girl. Honestly, I'm not sure if I would have been the same person as I am today had my parents chose to not move, because I would have had influences from my extended families and all of these things. So I'm not sure if I would have had that headspace to put my foot down and say, no, this is who I am, or would I have kind of gone through with it because well, elder, you know, in our culture, it's like, well, you have to listen to your elders, you have to, a lot of haves and a lot of have-nots where you cannot really, you know, you shouldn't speak up because that's rude, because there's an elder person in front of you saying how it is, because theoretically they know everything. Right?
Yeah.
Right. So that's one of the things that I'm really grateful for, in the sense that I'm not putting, not to say that it doesn't come from myself, like within myself, but to also say that I think your environment speaks volumes in terms of how you view yourself, and kind of the steps that you take towards these approaches, right? So I could have been married, you know, when I was 23, but I married when I was almost 30, right? So even those things, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, like that's like really old to be married when you're, you know, almost 30. Like, is everything okay? You know, it's those things.
There were hurdles that, you know, I still faced in terms of workplace hurdles. I'm sure that's something that you would have gone through as well. And I know personally, I speak with my hands quite a bit. And yeah, I would have people staring down at me and, you know, trying, especially telling me, you know, oh, what does that mean? I don't really understand. And I don't think my English is that bad that you can't understand. But yeah, they would prompt and stop my conversations, cut me off. And it was, yeah, I think at that time I should have spoken something, which I didn't. And today, when I look back, almost, I would say, 19 years back, I think, man, I should have said something at that time and shut the person up.
I know, right? I think that's part of, because I think for you, what I mentioned was I grew up in a small town where I wasn't represented, my family wasn't represented. So I think part of that challenge was that I felt like I couldn't be that person for myself, because I didn't also want to be the focus focus in the room, and going through those questions of, you know, where are you from, you know, your different variations of your name that's being said, and you constantly having to correct people and repeat people and all those things. It just becomes very daunting when you're doing it for such a long period of time. But I feel like that also builds and builds within yourself, in the sense where you're saying, okay, well, enough is enough. If I don't kind of put a stop to this, or if I don't provide awareness and guidance in this space, it's not going to stop. It's just going to continue. And even looking at it from a perspective of kind of what you were saying in terms of the hand gestures, I do it too. It's part of who I am. I speak with my hands. And it's also about that, your self accountability to kind of stand up for yourself and eventually say, you know what, like what you're saying is not, you know, it's not right. This is who I am. You need to embrace my authentic self. But it also kind of comes down to that representation piece in the workplace, right? And you and I spoke about this before, is when you're the only woman of color and, you know, you all of a sudden are being volunteered to do work in EDI, equity, diversity, inclusion, belonging practices. And you're in a spot like, well, I can't speak for every woman of color.
Yeah. And that's where, you know, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable comes in, I guess, and having those deeper conversations, right? And I think also to help other women understand that they're not alone. And many of us have gone through this. And I think it's high time we, you know, stop hiding from what the reality is and just speak up.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There comes a point in our lives in in where you stop seeking change and you make change happen. And it has to kind of start within yourself. Otherwise, it's not possible. It has to start with your headspace and saying, you know what, this is my accountability to stand up for myself, because I'm also looking out for my future generations, you know, other women of color that's going to follow in my path. And I need to kind of set an example in terms of approaching these, you know, very uncomfortable situations and not hide, right? But I think that's also part of a barrier that's faced, because when men speak out, it's deemed something. When women speak out, it's deemed something else, right? It's like, oh my goodness, she's aggressive. Yeah. Oh my goodness, that was very rude. However, if a man ended up saying the same thing, oh wow, like I loved your initiative and your authoritativeness on this. You know, so I think even having those definitions somehow influences how we're going to approach things. Yeah, allyship is so important in the case, and allyship can come from all sorts of forms. It could be even, you know, your male colleagues who are allies for you. It could be executives. It could be anyone. It could be your parents, children, anyone. I think it's really important to authentically be an ally. Yeah. I think that's really important, because allyship is viewed differently on so many levels. It's not just, you and I spoke about this, it's not just, you know, clicking a button and liking what someone's saying about the EDI space. I'm like, yeah, totally right. I mean, I'm going to click on this and that means, you know, I agree or I'm going to like, but they're not necessarily going to speak out within their own organization, right? I think allyship is about embracing the uncomfortable, as you said, and saying, you know what, enough is enough. This isn't right. And I'm going to support my colleague or my partner or my friend, whoever, and stand by them when they're standing on their own, right? So I think that's really important for people to even evaluate if they're looking to be an ally or they already are an ally. What does that actually mean? Like, what are they contributing? And what is their accountability in being an ally? And that comes from us as well as South Asian women. Yep. How are we allies for other South Asian women? What is our self-accountability? Are we only fighting for ourselves, or are we also fighting for other women as well? So I think that's really important to reflect and to take a big step forward on. I'm really, really thankful in the way that BuildUp Women happened, because I haven't been a witness to inclusive conversations, and still now it's there's that resentment or there's that resisting or that lack of awareness of that in that space in terms of what it means to have inclusive conversations. And I'm really grateful in the way that with BuildUp Women, my intentionality behind it was to make sure that the conversations were inclusive and open to anyone to really come forward and share their thoughts and build their own sense of community. I think that's was very important as well. In a day and age where women's issues are still not necessarily at a high priority of conversation, and then to take it a bit deeper, you know, women of color, you know, women who have a disability, women who are part of the LGBTQ2S+ community, newcomer immigrant women, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. But I think part of that journey is for people and even organizations to audit themselves and saying, well, what are we not doing right? How can we do better in what we are really striving to do? And make that an actionable plan to make sure that these conversations or events or whatever are inclusive and not leaving anyone out. But yeah, you're absolutely right.
It's March 8th, so happy Women's Day to everybody. And hopefully this can lead up to something more concrete. And, I hope change comes sooner than later. It's affected more women than we've ever known before. So these conversations need to be real. And I'm glad that there's a platform like yours to have those conversations.
Yeah, and I feel, unfortunately, COVID has also been used as an excuse. Like these concerns didn't exist before COVID. That's absolutely wrong. Yes, there were concerns with mental health, concerns with job loss, all these things. But COVID just, unveiled a lot more, and it amplified a lot more in terms of what the disproportionate impact has been on women.
True.
And it's not to say that, okay, well, after COVID, I think that's my biggest worry, is that after COVID, the change is going to stop, or those questions are going to stop being asked. And I don't want that. So what I really want people to do with this conversation, my hope is to, well, one, not just wait, not just to have these conversations on International Women's Day, but to your point, continuously have those conversations. And also that reflection within ourselves and saying, well, what am I doing to kind of move this forward? What am I doing for my partner, or my family, for myself? What do I need to do to kind of stand up against this, and who can I ally with and support and provide like guidance to? So I think it's not just about us seeking the change, but how can we make that happen within ourselves so we can put that step forward? I think that's such a crucial piece to the accountability side, because we're always seeking that accountability from other organizations, but we don't seek that within ourselves.
I know. And I think that has to come from each one of us to, give ourselves the permission to do so. I think we hold back a lot.
Permission to do so, permission to also be okay with it not going well, because it is a lot of pressure in saying that, I'm going to take this on as a person, as a woman of color. My first approach when I stood up, it didn't go very well. That doesn't mean stop doing it, continue on the path. I think that's really, really important, that, we put so much pressure on ourselves to get it right in the first time, to make things happen the first time, but it's a gradual and a continual process. It's also a learning process for both ends, depending on what it is that you're looking to tackle, but to just not stop and keep going.
Thank you so much, Sowmya. This was fabulous, and thanks for being here and sharing your input. And hopefully we'll have more women speak up and have these conversations.
Yeah, no, this is a great way to mark International Women's Day. I'm so thankful. We need to celebrate everyone. At the same time, we also need to take some accountability on ourselves to make sure that continues, that work continues, and it doesn't just stop with one person or a couple of people. So thank you so much for inviting. I'm glad that this collaboration happened. I felt like this conversation was really important. And my only, ask for everyone who's listening is to really take that time to self-reflect on your position and, your position as on International Women's Day, and just kind of ask yourself, what are you going to do for yourself, but also for others as well in the space. So.